great.
I don't like this.
Where are we? Fear not, I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Fortunately, that's not necessarily what D&D is like. And I just gotta say, that guy's a terrible representation of a Dungeon Master. We are not all that weird. Hurtful depictions aside, at its core, D&D is just a set of rules. Admittedly, that doesn't sound very exciting, but the actual game itself can be literally anything you and your friends want. At its most basic, D&D is a collaborative storytelling game where you take on the role of a fictional character going on an adventure along with your group of fellow players. Your characters can explore, fight, and talk to other people in the world. There isn't a way to win, the goal of the game is simply to have fun. The potential setting and genre for your game is infinite in possibility. It could be a murder mystery in a magical version of Victorian England, or a survival campaign that takes place on a spaceship with a dwindling food supply. The character you play can also be whoever you want. If you want to play as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, you can do that.
Go to hell.
Whatever the setting might be, the world your character exists in is run by our old friend.
Lose this, wizard?
The Dungeon Master creates the world, describes the situation your characters are in, plays all the NPCs you interact with, ensures that rules get followed, and helps move the story along. A DM creates conflict not to be mean, but because a story without any conflict isn't really interesting or fun. The DM has so much control over the world because everything takes place in our collective
imagination.
The main way we play the game is by talking to each other. The DM describes the world and the situation, and you then tell the DM how your character reacts. All of this is done verbally, and the players imagine the scenarios in their heads. But for those who struggle with mentally visualizing these verbal descriptions, there are other ways to show information. A DM can have maps of the world or cities, reference images for certain buildings or creatures, and just use pop culture references as visual shorthand. It's really hard to describe a quirky treehouse, but it's really easy to imagine one if you just say, it looks kind of like the treehouse from Adventure Time. Importantly, you don't need to be imaginative to play, or at least think of yourself that way. With some time figuring out how you like to play, imagining what your character does and what happens to them will come naturally. And you know what else relies on imagination? The amazing part of D&D is that you can be whoever you want. If you're shy in real life but want to try and play a character who's really talkative, you can. No matter your gender, if you want your character to be male, female, non-binary, or any other identity, you can do that. I personally really enjoy playing characters different from myself, but you can do whatever you want. Just keep in mind when creating your character that they should care about something. Most adventurers are risking their lives, so they probably have some reason for going. Also, your character should be able to hang out with a group of random adventurers. It's hard to play and interact with a character who only wants to be alone, opposes all other players, and just oozes angst. Basically, just try to create a character that has the capacity to care, because apathy's a tragedy and boredom is a crime. Exactly, thank you. While creating your character's personality is amazing, what your character can do is largely decided by your race and class. Mostly class. The races in D&D are more akin to different species than anything else. Each one has a small perk. For example, Aarakocras can fly and Dragonborns have breath weapon, but you should check out the descriptions online to see what other mechanical benefits each one has. Or just go based on what you think is coolest. That's totally fine. The classes in D&D are what makes each player unique. Each class has a special set of skills that they bring to the group, all of them important. Basically, think of your class as your superpower. Okay, here's a way too quick, reductive, and bad explanation of all the different classes. Artificers are master inventors and builders, bards are musicians who cast their magic with their art, barbarians are combatants who get so mad that they fight extra good, clerics are healers and are usually devout to some higher power, druids are one with nature and they can turn into animals. Fighters fight, they're a capable all-around combatant. Monks are martial artists, their body is their weapon. Paladins are warriors devoted to a cause or belief. They could fight for a god or an ideology like love or revenge. Rangers are like Robin Hood in that they hang out in the wilderness a lot and, according to the handbook, combats threats on the edges of civilizations. I have no clue what that means, but they seem cool maybe? Rogues are like Robin Hood in that they're good at stealing stuff. The last three are all magic users, but are different in how they get their magic. Sorcerers are born with it, it's innate. Warlocks made a pact with a god or a demon. Wizards studied really hard, those absolute nerds. Now that you have your character, how do you actually play the game? The main rule or mechanic of the game is, Whenever you want to accomplish a task that is at least somewhat difficult, you roll a 20-sided dice called a d20. The higher you roll on the dice, the more likely you are to achieve the goal that you want to accomplish. The game is inherently built on luck.
Luck is not a superpower. What, you shoot luck lasers out of your eyes?
But each character is good at a specific skill. For example, if your character is, I don't know, say The Rock, then he should be really good at acting. So the math on his character sheet will reflect that, making it more likely that he'll succeed on tasks that require performance. Let's say, in-game, you wanted to have The Rock go to an improv class and impress his classmates. You might roll a 12 on the dice, which isn't very good, but with The Rock's +4 performance modifier, he's able to perform well enough to gain the respect of his peers. The character sheet looks complicated, and that's because it is, but most of the info isn't really needed to start, and the rest the DM can teach you as you're playing. For a quick example of how the mechanics in combat works, let's show you a grid map. This could be physical or digital, depending on if you play in person or online, but since at Young Dragonslayers we play digitally, let's go to Roll20. As you can see here, your character, The Rock, is on the roof of a building, adjacent to another tall building, and beneath them is a bunch of fire. He's being chased by some guards. Here you can either choose to run or fight. For now we're going to choose to fight, so first thing you do is roll initiative. Initiative determines when characters get to act in combat. Those with higher numbers get to go sooner. So you roll your 20-sided dice and add your initiative modifier, which we can see here on the character sheet. So we'll roll it. The Rock, your character, rolled a 10 plus 2, which is 12. Now the DM will off-screen roll for the other 3 enemy NPCs. 2 of them rolled higher than The Rock, so they'll be going first, followed by The Rock, and then the last enemy. When someone tries to hit you, they need to roll their d20 and get a number equal to or higher than your armor class to be successful. One rolled a 12 exactly on the dice, and the other rolled a 15, so they both hit. Now they each do 1d6 damage to The Rock. So rolling those, one got a 2, and the other got a 3. So they're gonna go to The Rock and attack. And hit points can be tracked on your character sheet, and he took 5 points of damage. It is now The Rock's turn, and he's realized that he's not doing too well and should probably run away. So he's going to move as part of his turn, as far as he can, and then he's going to try to jump across this whole chasm. It is 35 feet, which he's not normally able to make at that distance, so the DM is going to require him to make an athletics check to jump across that huge chasm in the middle. The DM might tell you that you need to roll a 20 or higher to make it to the other side. Let's see if he's able to make it. With a 17, he's really close to reaching that goal. Since he is so close, the DM will give The Rock a chance to pull himself back up if he can beat a 20 on an athletics check. Let's see if he can do it. With a total of 22, he's able to pull himself back up onto the ledge and barely make it into the skyscraper. If we were just looking at the number on the dice, The Rock would not have been able to pull himself back up, but with a +5 athletics modifier, he's able to do it. There are literally an infinite number of ways to resolve an issue when playing D&D. DMs don't have a limited number of inputs and outputs like computer code. We can do pretty much anything and adapt to what the player wants. For example, in this combat, you might have tried to persuade the guards to let you go, or fully gone into custody, or a literal infinite number of other possibilities that I can't think of. When playing D&D, the story and plot is reactionary, so depending on what your player might do, that'll change what happens later on in the game. And that's okay, and why this game is so amazing. That was a brief rundown of what D&D is and how to play. If that was confusing to grasp, that is totally fine. Learning D&D can be pretty overwhelming. So if you can, try to find a group to play with, since the best way to learn is by diving in and having someone be willing to teach you. And if you can't find anyone who's willing to do that, or you want to give D&D a try, we offer intro classes that teach you the basics and give you a chance to play the game with other people. And if you like that, we have weekly ongoing groups where you can hang out with similar people and go on fantastical adventures together. If you enjoyed, please like the video and subscribe. Maybe share it with someone who you're trying to induct into the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you so much, see you next time. You might be wondering, does Sergio actually love Dwayne Johnson that much? No. He seems nice enough, but don't love him that much. That being said, I did spend 6 hours 3D printing this bad boy, and I gotta say, it was absolutely worth every minute.